Okay, morning Year 12 psychologists. Just first of all, just want to say well done with all the work you've been doing. It's been fantastic. Everyone seems to be keeping on top of stuff, which is great. Just going to do a bit of housekeeping before we get stuck into the video. So by now, make sure you've submitted your picture onto Teams. I know most of you have done that, which is great. Some really good work there, so well done. We're going to be looking at today the evaluation for the cognitive approach to explaining depression. So by now you should have done task 2 here, which is the pre-reading and to write your kind of own evaluation of the theory. The YouTube video we've got now, we're going to go through the theory initially, so going over last week's work as well as the evaluations, kind of bringing that all together. We've also got, so I've got here for task 4, please revise psychopathology so far. We've done quite a lot now. Okay, you've got some essay questions as well that I'll be marking this week, and you'll get some individual feedback on that. Also, I'd like us to have a kind of sort of mini extended knowledge recall, mini assessment type thing on Monday the 1st of June. So we're going to do like an extended knowledge recall, but I'll send out some more details about that. We can also talk about that in our first session on Friday. So our Q&A session that will be happening now. For the first instance, it's going to be on the Friday, and we'll see how we get going with that and see how many people can make it. And it's just kind of a drop-in Q&A. I'm going to also ask you beforehand to kind of prepare some questions, but we'll have a chat about that on Teams before on Thursday. So we'll meet on Teams, have a bit of a chat at 10 a.m. It'll be a video call. You don't have to use video. I've got permission from all your parents for that, so that's fine. But if you don't want to use video, that's fine. If you want to just drop in and have a chat, or if you just want to drop in and listen to what's being discussed, okay, it's entirely up to you. Okay, so that's that for Friday. Apart from the revision task, all work is going to be due on Friday, because of course we've got half term. Believe it or not, half term already next week. Okay, so we're going to get stuck into the work that you've been doing this week, focusing on the cognitive approach to explaining depression. I just wanted to take a little bit of time just to go through the theory and kind of make sure that everyone's happy with this. Okay, so we are looking at a cognitive approach, and so you said the key assumption here is around our thoughts, thought processes, okay, which we were talking about last week. There are 3 kind of key elements in writing. If you're going to get a 6-mark question, an AO1 question describing the cognitive approach to explaining depression, there'll be 3 kind of key elements that you'd want to include here. So we need to mention schemas, we need to mention cognitive biases, and how this all comes together in what we refer to as Beck's negative triad. So we're going to go through this initially. So schemas, Beck believes that schemas believes that people become depressed because the world is seen negatively. Okay, so this idea that schemas are like a cognitive framework, if you like, based on our own experiences in life, and we hold these kind of schemas around the world to help us interpret the world. Okay, it says here, these schemas then continued into adulthood, providing a negative framework to viewing life in a pessimistic fashion. Another way to think of it is almost like putting on a pair of goggles and viewing the world through pessimistic eyes, if you like. And we use schemas to interpret the world. If we have a negative schema about ourselves, then we'll interpret all the information about ourselves in a negative way. And that can go across all sorts of aspects of life, okay, depending on the person, depending on the experience they have, and depending on the schemas that they've built up over time, this kind of cognitive framework. That if someone does have these negative schemas, that can lead to negative biases. And a good way to think of a bias, if we take another analogy of bowls, for example. I know my grandparents played bowls; they were well into it. They absolutely loved it. And on one of the bowls, on a side, it has a bias, and that enables the ball to turn in one way. And no matter how you throw that ball, it will always turn either to the right or to the left. It will always turn depending on which way you have the bias. So if we imagine that as like you're thinking, okay, you bowl that ball down, and it will veer off in one direction. It has a bias, and we can think of that in the same way as if you have a negative schema, the bowling ball, for example, with a negative bias on it, it will always go in that negative direction. And we can think of that as our as our thinking as well. Some people will have a very positive outlook on life, and they'll have lots and lots of positive schemas. Some people will have lots of negative schemas, and they'll have a very negative view on various aspects of life. And some of those people may end up with depression. So the bias is the leaning or an inclination to the negative way of thinking, and those negative biases can then lead to what we call negative errors. So I just wanted to pick up on this because there should actually be a correction in your booklet. So negative schemas lead to cognitive biases, a way of thinking in one direction, that negative way, just like a bowling ball, and are reinforced by cognitive errors. Cognitive errors are the actual thoughts that happen as a result of those specific cognitive biases. So we have general, if we think from kind of the large idea of general negative schemas leading to negative or cognitive biases in the negative direction, which can then lead to these specific cognitive errors. So going from the more global idea to a more specific idea of these cognitive errors, and they all link together. And we mentioned a couple of these in the PowerPoint video last week. This idea of, for example, overgeneralizing. Okay, I never do anything right. Yeah, so that is an example of a negative cognitive error, and we call it an error because it's highly likely that it is not a true reflection of reality. It is very rarely true that somebody is not good at anything, right? There's that's an overgeneralization, a negative cognitive error as a result of the cognitive bias, as a result of the negative schemas, and we can kind of work backwards there and how this all links together. Now then, the negative schemas and cognitive biases maintain what Bex refers to as the cognitive triad. And this cognitive triad kind of explains depression from the cognitive perspective. But the key here, and kind of the key word here, is that the schemas, the general schemas that we have that lead to the cognitive biases and the cognitive errors, maintain. Okay, and we can highlight that, maintain what Bex refers to as the cognitive triad. And this is what we call a kind of pessimistic, irrational view of three parts of the person's belief system that all link together. Okay, so a negative view of the self, a negative view of the world, and a negative view of the future. And it's our negative thoughts, our irrational thinking, schemas leading to biases, leading to cognitive errors that will maintain this negative triad and leading to depression. So that's Beck's theory, okay, in a nutshell. Our second theory that we looked at was similar, okay, but slightly more linear, I guess, in the modelling of it, and Ellis's kind of ABC model. More kind of reactive in terms of an event that may happen. So Ellis believed that those who are suffering from depression mistakenly blame external events for their unhappiness. And we mentioned last week this idea of a locus of control, which we've visited before in social influence and social change, that often people with an external locus of control feel that they don't have control over the events that are in their life. And often we find that those that are depressed have an external locus of control. They feel that lots of the elements and events that happen in their life are out of their control. And this can also lead to the feelings of helplessness that we often see with depressed patients. Now, if we look at the model here on the right-hand side, we can see we've got the ABC model, the A being the activating event, B the rational or irrational belief in the case of a depressed person, and C the consequence. So a nice simple model. And the left side here, you can see my cursor, that would be kind of in quotations, a normal person. Right? A negative event would happen, there'd be a rational belief, a justification, and a healthy negative emotion that the person is able to deal with and get over. Someone suffering with depression, if a negative event happens, they'll have an irrational belief, very much similar to the cognitive errors that we looked at in Beck's theory, and that will lead to unhealthy and negative emotion. Okay, that often they cannot get rid of, this kind of spiral of negativity. So to look at an example here, last week you were in the PowerPoint, you were trying to come up with your own examples. There's another one here for you to have a look at. So this refers to an event in the environment, the activating event. These events are everyday obstacles and difficulties that everyone is forced to deal with when interacting with the world. We come across negative, difficult events quite often, and particularly in these difficult times as well, right? So, but it's how we sort of justify what's going on, how we react to that. and the kind of depressed patient will react to this more negatively. So the beliefs then is your belief about the situation can be rational or irrational. Rational thoughts may include that the event is a major disaster or that we must always be perfect. So this kind of links nicely to, like I said, the cognitive errors in Beck's theory. So the example we've got here is, for example, you achieve a low grade on a test in class. The rational belief would be, well, I didn't prepare well for that. The irrational would be, I'm a failure, I'm not good at learning. Okay, again, kind of linking to cognitive errors, a generalization there. The consequence would be then, for example, as you feel failure for not doing well in your test, you have feelings of worthlessness. Whereas someone who might kind of soon get over that and be able to move on, someone with depression may feel worthless. They may feel that they're unable to move forward with that. A key element of this, though, is in terms of the irrational thinking, is what we refer to as masturbatory thinking. Got to be careful saying that. Thinking that certain ideas or assumptions must be true in order for the individual to be happy. And the three most important irrational beliefs identified by Ellis are the following. I must be approved of or accepted by people I find important. I must do well or very well, or I'm worthless. And the world must give me happiness. Now, if these can't be withheld, the person will feel worthlessness and it will spiral into their kind of depressed state. These are almost conditions in a way for their happiness, okay? Which is another key element of Ellis's theory. So we've got here the ABC model, the activating event, the beliefs, the irrational belief leading to the negative consequences and the depressed symptoms that we see. Now then, so that was kind of going back over the theory, and I wanted to do that before having a look at the evaluation. Now your job really is to have a look at the reading in the textbook and to kind of create your own evaluation here. Again, paying attention to our point, evidence, explain, and potentially counterpoint format. And what I've done here for this evaluation is just to remind us of the structure, and if we are using readings to develop our evaluations, that we should also be adding our own elaborations, our own ideas, our own thoughts. And that's what I've done here as an example. And you can see that the parts highlighted in blue are things that, I've read the evaluation, I've gone, well, actually, I can extend on that. I can extend my thinking and my own thoughts and position on this. So I'm going to read through this and just, you can see there the bits that I've extended. And what I'd like you to do in a minute is, once you've gone through this evaluation, is to pause the video, go back over your evaluation, go, right, have I just kind of written what's in the textbook, or have I gone beyond? Have I also got the structure in my evaluation? So one strength is there is research support for the role of irrational thinking. For example, Hammond and Krantz, 1976, found depressed patients in their study made errors in logic when asked to interpret written material than non-depressed patients, so more than non-depressed patients. This research supports the view that negative thinking leads to depression, and specifically, I've here related back to the theory, and specifically supports the notion of negative schemas leading to cognitive biases and causing the cognitive errors. This error in logic that Hammond and Krantz are referring to is an example of a cognitive error, so we should tie into that. However, this link, and I've done a counterpoint here. Yeah? However, this link does not mean that negative thoughts cause depression. And I've elaborated on this further. What does that mean? It only shows an association. Okay, I'll type it. It only shows an association. Therefore, cause and effect relationship cannot be established. Right? I've kind of elaborated on this. Okay, and elaborated it and explained what I mean by that point. As a result, it may be that negative thinking may develop because of depression, suggesting other factors play a part in the cause of the mental disorder. Now, so what I'd like you to do then, at this point, is to go back through your evaluation and think, well, have I elaborated on my evaluative points? Have I, really gone to town on the point, evidence, explain part, and particularly the explain part? Have you done a counterpoint like I have? Have you elaborated on it? So do pause the video and have a check of your evaluation for that. Okay, now on to the next strength. So I said, however, further strength is that there are practical applications, and it's really important we write this evaluation clearly. Okay, so what we can do here, when we look at a theory, we can say, well, if there's therapies based on this theory, and the therapy that's based on this theory is effective, then it must, on some level, suggest that the original theory is valid. Otherwise, the therapy that we're using wouldn't be effective. Right? The success of the therapy validates the theory, and we can use that as support. So that's what we've got here. But again, look at how I've kind of elaborated and extended my answer here. So further strength is that there are practical applications in terms of the therapy for the disorder. For example, cognitive explanations have successfully been applied to CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, with this therapy regarded as the best and most widely used treatment of depression. We know that CBT is used a lot as a treatment in the NHS. Okay? It's relatively inexpensive once it's set up. You can also have digital CBT, which reduces costs, but it's also highly effective in terms of success rates. Okay? Especially when used in combination with drug therapy. So this is a strength, and I'll explain why is it a strength. This is a strength for the theory. For the theory, remember, we're evaluating the theory. So this is a strength for the theory because the success of the therapy suggests that the cognitive approach to explaining depression must in some part be valid, otherwise CBT would be ineffective. And again, I'll explain this even further. If depression is alleviated by challenging irrational thinking, then this suggests such thoughts play a role in depression in the first place, supporting the cognitive explanation for disorder. And we've always got to remember that we are, what are we evaluating here? We're evaluating the theory, not the therapy. We're evaluating the theory, but we're using the success of the therapy to support and suggest that the theory itself is valid. So again, pause the video. Have you gone into enough detail? Have you elaborated on your points and explained fully? And importantly, have you linked it back to the theory? Because that's what we're evaluating. Okay, now you've got a couple of weaknesses here, which were in the book anyway, so I'm not going to read through these necessarily, but what I would like you to do is there's a third weakness, okay, in the textbook, okay, and that picks up on the idea that there may be alternative explanations, okay. We've only looked at a cognitive approach to explaining depression, and there are other approaches, of course, and we know from a lot of scientific research that there's a strong biological element to depression, both with genetic factors as well as linking to low levels of serotonin, which we know controls mood. So what I'd like you to do, once you're happy with your evaluation here, is to go to the textbook and have a look at that biological explanation as an alternative explanation. Okay, write again another weakness, to go against this theory. Okay, that there could be a potentially better explanation. As a result, we could say then, the cognitive approach is an incomplete explanation for depression. Okay, and that'd be a really good kind of extension task if you'd like to do that. Bringing that all together, you can summarise your strengths and weaknesses, and then following that, you should then plan your essay for this, okay, which was in the work. Okay, so pause the video, go back over your evaluation. The key idea here is, have you extended your answers? Have you fully elaborated your evaluation here? So we're just going to go back to the original work that was set. So number 3, that's the YouTube video that we're doing now. That's available today. That will go up shortly. We're then to revise revise psychopathology so far for extended knowledge recall, and then we'll see you all, hopefully, this Friday, 10 AM on Teams for the Q&A. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.